Welcome to the last community call of 2025. It's crazy to think that we're already speaking in 2026 language now. Um, as per usual, this is a call for people to kind of come in and drop their own topics and discuss whatever's top of mind on their side. And then myself, I'm kind of bringing in the stories from the product group that I'd like to float with all of you. So, uh, my main thing that I'm thinking about going into 2026 is how we're gonna continue to support and really scale with Azure RM. There's been the long-standing problem of features, functionality sitting out there. And my question, to put it very simply and bluntly, is this. If you had a way of utilizing some sort of AI assisted workflow to contribute to the Azure provider, would you or would you not use it to unblock yourself or other teams or just in general? And why or why not?
So the question was if we would use AI for an Azure RM workflow.
Yeah, let's say that it's actually a level deeper than that. So, Dominique, you've never had a feature in Azure M that you wish came out but wasn't out, right?
When you create a subnet on a virtual network and you have a policy in place that denies the creation of subnets without NSGs attached, network security groups, it will fail because the way Azure RM does it is it creates the subnet and then attaches it. And there's a GitHub issue for this that was created and then locked. So now you have to use AZ API to create a subnet with an attached NSG. So I wish Azure RM could do that.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting scenario there. That's an interesting edge case too, because I think you'd have to essentially change the way the provider behaves if you were to make that request.
So if I had an AI for Azure RM, I would want the AI to rewrite it to use AZ API in that specific scenario.
Got it.
So are you asking about using an AI to contribute back to Azure RM for fixes or updates or to supplement it?
I'm floating the idea in the room of would people make contributions to the Azure Arm provider if there is an AI tool to help them do so that like we provided or some yeah, let's just say that we provided it.
You mean like a tool that helps you adhere to the coding standards of that provider?
Yeah, and I think, infra DevOps is not the same as being a Golang programmer. So certainly those are not the it would try to help bridge the technical knowledge that a lot of you have with the existing provider schemas, contributor guidelines, all that stuff.
So are you thinking of something along the lines of um, GitHub Copilot agent?
Yeah, probably. I can't say for sure how it will look. This is just a pure like thought exercise, if you will. So don't take this as we're releasing it tomorrow.
Me personally, I think I would, because whenever I raise an issue, be it Azure RM or an Azure Verified module, and I found a solution myself, I'm always trying to provide some example code that could just be added to the module upon review. So yeah, I would definitely try to contribute if I quite confident that I found a solution.
Got it.
I think one part of it is that sometimes the Azure RM provider flops if you have like it treats an ID as case sensitive where you have resource groups instead of resource groups where one is capital R, one's lowercase r. And if there was a VS Code extension or something that I could just paste that into and say, this is stupid, write the fix, and it would create it would know where in the repo, like in the Go code, where it's doing the case sensitive operation. It would be able to kind of give a detailed thing instead of like cloning the repo using the Copilot agent and actually like doing the fix, having a detailed enough issue that if someone who actually was more of a Golang programmer or who was going to do a bunch of solves on these issues, that like the AI would help inflate the issue with all the information necessary to actually fix it. Whereas me as the user, I just want to be able to highlight the text in the terminal and say, this is stupid because X instead of Y, and then it would phrase that nicely into an actual GitHub issue or something.
Yeah, that's an interesting problem too, because I think Dominic, both ones you've noted are about the design decisions within the provider. So those are ones that it's more than just adding functionality, it's changing the way the provider behaves. But I do think that bringing in that context and making that argument would be accelerated if you're not just writing it from scratch. And it sounds like you're talking about helping or having AI help you write your issue to really document or even explore what the potential fix would be, which is a good idea.
At least for my use case, I'm just doing the same things over and over again. I have resource groups and security groups and VNets or whatever. I'm not trying to use all these new services that maybe the AZ API provider has, but the AzureRM doesn't. So it's not like there's a new feature and then AzureRM doesn't have it. It's usually my scenario is that AzureRM has it, but there's something failing when I expect it to succeed.
Let me take a step back. Who here, I guess, is depending upon AzureRM for latest functionality? Like, does someone in this room have something that they wish AzureRM released in terms of features or functionality? Not like a design decision, sorry, Dominic, but something that they are waiting for and they just haven't seen it come out.
It's specific to just AzureRM or maybe also like Azure AD provider?
Uh, AzureRM for now, but we can talk about Azure AD in a second.
Yeah.
I've been heads down on
Then
that.
for now, no examples for AzureRM at the moment. Yeah.
So is everybody just using? Oh, go ahead, David.
Yeah, probably the most recent thing that we encountered. I mean, it wasn't necessarily us needing something specifically out of AzureRM at the time, but we made in one of our landing zones, we had an issue with fallback to internet setting on the private DNS zones, and the Azure verified module from the version we were on to the 2 versions up, I think, had made a change from AzureRM to Azure API or AZ API because fallback to internet wasn't available to AzureRM, I think. That caused us a bit of concern making that leap to a new version and switching to a different provider in the back end of it at the same time. But that team did a good job making that switch. Probably would have been a lot more seamless to be able to stick with AzureRM.
Yeah, yeah.
I would agree with what Dominic said. In the many years that I've been using the AzureRM provider, I can't think of an example where there was a resource that I needed new out of the box. Typically, I'm not taking up Azure Preview features, and by the time it's GA, AzureRM has it. It's almost always fixes and functionality that's missing rather than new resources, new features.
Got it. So you don't feel that pain, at least for your organization's requirements to even do that latest stuff. And yeah, we don't have a guarantee in terms of preview, but we do
Right.
sometimes hear people say, "Hey, this." I mean, I don't know if people remember like container apps way back when. It was like sitting there on the docket for months, and I remember sort of being embarrassed from my side, like, "Dang, we really can't get this out." Yeah, that's one that I remember, but if folks on the call haven't experienced that themselves, that's good to hear.
We've had problems with machine learning registry. It's not available yet. And some of the IP whitelisting stuff in the machine learning workspaces, we've had to fall back to the AZ API provider.
Are you finding that I guess let's not to recirculate a conversation I've had many times with some of you, but when you fall back, so to speak, do you find yourself saying, "Oh, AZ API is better or worse as a provider," or do you feel like it's the same? Do you feel like you can depend upon it moving forward and that it can actually stand on its own there? Because we have released that messaging around using AZ API for those scenarios.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably about same, honestly. A lot of our internal module registries are kind of just wrappers around existing things with some business logic included. So from that side of things, code-wise, it's kind of same. So not necessarily a problem, but we usually rely on AzureRM as a first case. And then if it's not available, we use to the AZ API provider.
Got it.
I second Stuart's message. We prefer using AzureRM because it's more user-friendly in our opinion, especially when it comes to building dependencies between the resources. And just it's more readable for humans and to interact. With AC API, I need dedicated knowledge about the body and also the API versions. But whenever there's a feature missing in Azure, we don't have any issues moving further with AC API and just solve our problems with that provider.
Got it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
the same.
echo. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to mention the same thing that Mario mentioned. We also use primarily AzureRM, and yeah, we use Azure AZ API only for exceptional use cases where something is not supported and is not planned to be added very soon, due to the same reasons.
I'll echo with everything that Michael and Mario said. But an example that I can give is like for the Linux function app, the minimum TLS cipher suite thing, it's not available in Azure RM. So we use AZ API for it. But recently I have attempted deploying front door with Azure RM, and I think many people can agree here that front door is complicated deploying even it with Terraform. So using AZ API for things that are not available in front door with Azure RM, it was so complicated even with AZ API. Lacking documentation on where to reference the structure for AZ API, right? So that's one of the challenges with using that AZ API.
Yeah, I do think that using AZ API, it's not as straightforward. The documentation piece we are starting to make some headway to the best of our abilities on. We have some AZ. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. Yeah, an example I can give, right? Like front door, the format that you need, what resource ID is one of the things that you need to use AZ API. So for front door, in order for me to grab that, it took a lot of time. There is no good documentation to say that this is the format you need for the front door WAF policy. This is the one you need for front door. All those things.
Got
It
it.
was pretty straightforward for the function app to add the cipher suite, but it's not as straightforward for the front door WAF policies and firewall, the front door firewall piece.
Got it. Not to call you out, Mark, if you are on the call, but can you talk about the put on the properties blob scenario that you ran into?
Yeah, this is more of like a one of those things that just has it's an annoyance, and like it tends to concern me, like, because on create AZ API is fine, right? I agree with everything everybody said, right? Like maybe it's a little cryptic because we have to go spelunking in the true ARM schema, right? But it works. It works great. Most 99% of the time on create. But on update, I don't get a strong sense of confidence that it is telling me exactly what's going to change at the field level. It will tell me, hey, it's almost like when I update like API management policies. It's like a big block of XML, right? And on the way the AzureRM provider works, it's like, okay, the old XML was this, the new XML was this, right? And it's like it's like, okay, but what if the property that I'm changing is actually gonna cause a replacement or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that it's those and I have not diligently logged the cases where it's happened to me, but it's happened to me enough times that like it's caused me to like second guess anytime I make an inline update to using AZ API. Yeah, I probably should log them better, but ideally, like I think if we implemented some Terraform tests, around some of the common well paved roads use cases that people use these resources, we could pretty easily in a robust way, kind of root out if and when the RPs are playing nicely or not, right?
Would that be, sorry, Mark, would that be embedded into the AZ API's provider level code, or would that be something that you'd almost like kind
No,
of
no,
offer side by side with it as your kind of runtiming, if you will?
no. It would be
Because
like a separate initiative where, like, ideally the product teams themselves would write their own Terraform tests for their own resources, and there would just be one big like registry of all the Terraform tests that light up green for all the scenarios, right? And it's like, okay, not only do I have all the sample code, right, that I know it works, managed identity on Azure Functions Linux apps, with the flex consumption model, like
yeah,
pick your scenario, go look at the Terraform test, there it works, right?
how close
Um,
is Preflight getting to? I don't know if you've played around with it or if anyone else on the call has, but I know Preflight is by design meant to sort of validate those things on a schema level generically, but have people found that portion to be useful where, the globally unique storage account name gets caught before you try to apply or anything like that?
I haven't actually played with Preflight. Maybe I should.
I would spin the wheels on that. I mean, personally, I think like it's one of those things that's kind of hard because if you enable pre-flight by default, I think it's a breaking, or it can actually be a little bit breaking or annoying if you're not aware of how it works. But it's one of those things that like if I could without consequences enable it for you by default, I would. Because of that scenario that you're speaking of,
I
where
see.
one
I
tries to catch that RP
like some of the
logic.
other callers. Like I use AZ API as like a last resort. No offense,
Right.
it's a wonderful
Right.
thing. It's a wonderful thing.
Right.
But like AzureRM is more readable, more concise. Like, and my brain doesn't hurt when I look at it. Right. But like some of these
Yeah.
AZ API resources get pretty verbose, and you know.
Yeah. It's an
So doing
interesting.
like pre-flight just for like the 1% of my code that's in AZ API, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a top priority, I'm imagining. Uh, it's an interesting problem because it sounds like most people are doing just fine with the brittleness of Azure RM in terms of, what happens. It's more readable, it's more easy to understand, and you're kind of willing to embrace whatever hiccups along the way that the provider chooses to give you in that journey. And then when you run into problems and when you kind of feel bumps along the road, then you default to AZ API. But the pain of moving the AZ API isn't, it sounds like, so great that people are jumping. Well, in terms of, let's pretend that you could Um, again, this is just me thinking out loud. I'm not backing this with real promises here. Let's say that you could use AI to create an issue for AzureRM on like a feature and then pitch it over to my team. Is that something that for the process itself, if you're helping write a PR or even get the issue kind of off the ground with some of the initial logic that would require the fix, does that feel more painful, less painful? Does it feel like it's not even worth it compared to just using AZ API? I think we're just trying to drill down into like what level of pain this feels like.
Can you restate a demonstration of what the flow would be? I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah. So I think someone mentioned ML registry. Okay, so I think AZ API supports ML registry today. AzureRM doesn't support a lot of the stuff going on there. So between using AZ API to fix the ML registry problem versus let's say that we have a way of creating issues in AzureRM where you can essentially check this box and it will use AI to help you create the issue and detail the recommended change, um, and even help with writing a PR if you wanted to. Between the two, which one would you go towards? Again, this is a hypothetical world, not necessarily anything that is happening tomorrow.
So one option was creating an issue with the assistance of AI that proposes a change, and then what was the other option?
Just go in AZ API as you do today.
So when AzureRM lacks a feature, do we submit a request with or without AI help to get the new feature, or do we just kind of not contribute upstream and just switch to AZ API kind of thing?
Yeah. And honestly, if you think both is, you could do both technically as well.
Yeah. The easy flow, I think, is creating a GitHub issue, very casual, no template, no run these 6 commands and paste the logs, would be create the GitHub issue and use very baby talk and then have Copilot or something reply. So not as part of the drafting of the issue, but as part of the triage of the issues would be Copilot could jump in and say, hey, your issue is ambiguous, but we think it could mean one of 3 things, and then kind of prompt the user to expand on it. And then that could get to the point where there is enough context for the AI to help jumpstart the change to AzureRM kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So lowering the activation energy on creating the issue, because I guess the thing that's important is if 60 people have this issue where it's like AzureRM is not meeting my needs, and all 60 of them just jump to AZ API without giving any signal, then you guys don't know what thing to prioritize. Whereas if 10 different people said, hey, this thing's missing, and then that's the entire content of it, then the
Right.
AI could triage that issue, adjust the title, create the tags, and identify which issues are duplicates of the others, then that lowers the energy a lot.
Yep.
And this might exist already, but is there ways to convert between AzureRM and AZ API?
There is. If you have the VS Code extension, there is a preview feature that allows you to highlight a block of code and basically convert it into AZ API. You can't do it the other way. That's because of how I think it has to do with some sort of like maybe it was the Terraform plugin SDK, and I think that's coming with 5.0 for AzureRM. But yeah, you can do it from AzureRM into AZ API. Granted, there's no guarantees that it's at your own risk, right? Because I don't think we've solved for all the edge cases in terms of any sort of plan difference or anything.
Yeah, it's not a one-to-one perfect bidirectional mapping yet.
It can be. I would just encourage you to try it out and see how bad the plan output looks. And then if it actually does happen to just say, because it will create the moved block as well for your state. So give it a shot, see
Wait,
how it goes.
You can state move between providers?
You can now. So
That's
you
crazy.
can state block, or yeah, so it creates a move block from Azure to AZ API for you as well.
No way. That works. I thought
Yeah,
you'd have to
that's
remove and
what
then
was
import.
used. No,
Here,
that
let
was what
me
was used for
That
private DNS Azure Verified module to
I mean, it
let me
makes
see if I'm
sense.
gonna make
RM to.
myself eat my own words. I'm gonna try
Holy
to spin
cow.
it up
I mean,
right
if
now.
true, that's huge. Like, wow.
Because I guess both providers are reasonably
That's
talking about the same thing, so it makes sense that that would be
yeah,
something that
that's
Terraform
what
supports.
the
True. I mean, I guess I just assumed that there'd be something deep within the bowels of like the Terraform CLI that would not want to do that. But
that's what the process was for the private DNS Azure Verified module to move from our Azure RM to AZ API. So it had to move a whole file of move block.
wow,
It worked pretty seamlessly.
that's awesome. Well, good job,
All right.
whoever did that, Stephen.
Yes, I'll let them know. I'm gonna tempt fate and try to, with no prior plan, spin it up now. So,
Oh no, live demo.
a spontaneous live demo.
The best
Yes,
kind. The best.
the best kind. The one that the demo itself wasn't even ready for. Okay. Let's see here. Let me hold on. So before I share my screen, let me drop a link to the provider doc that actually talks about this. AZ API, no, stop that. Guides. Here we are. Here's the feature in the chat. So you can go play around with that and kick the tires on it. And oh, this is not playing nice with me. Okay. All right. Let me share my screen. So nothing crazy going on here. We just have a Linux web app. If you have the VS Code extension, then all you need to do, the Microsoft Terraform one, is you can highlight a resource. There's this little light bulb that shows up that says show code actions, and then it can say migrate to AZ API provider. And of course it breaks as soon as I try to do it. Oh, I need a state. So the big limitation, I always forget this, is you need to actually have this in state to make the run succeed. So let me go and
Because is it running like Terraform commands in the background, or?
what I think it is that it needs some Terraform commands and the schema from the state file, but I forget. It's been a few months since I have actually talked about this one. The reason we didn't market it was it's one of those things where you don't want to like break somebody's prod environment where they're just trying to do this. Yet at the same time, we're like, hey, I need to log in. Hold on, give me a second.
I mean, worst case, they just like re-import it back into the old AzureRM, right?
Yeah, that should be the case, but I think we just didn't want to hold ourselves liable. This is because there was a period of time where we were like, can we get this to like an actual high level of confidence? But it became a little bit hard to do much more than get it like 80% of the way there. It's sort of an export all over again sort of situation. So
Stephen, I wanted to share one of the use cases that I find myself using AZ API very, very heavily. I think we talked about this before. It's with data plane resources for many of the AI services that we have, because like the data plane SDK is kind of at the mercy of those kind of bespoke product teams. And those services tend to have a lot of data plane resources, AI Foundry, Azure AI Search, that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I thought you said that there was something coming with data plane. Or maybe it was Matt White. I can't remember. Somebody said there's going to be some massive updates with data plane support in AZ API.
yeah, actually, let's talk about that. Because my demo's not working, so I can buy some time and talk about it while we're figuring the demo out. Do people want a data plane that is, because the whole thing about the data plane is it's this Wild West, right? We don't have the management.azure.com common URL. We don't have the guarantee of create, read, update, delete. So there's no real way to support a resource for everything in the data plane in that sort of like crowd friendly way without getting hacky. Would people use a AZ API data plane action essentially and utilize that to basically construct a CRUD resource or whatever sort of behavior they were looking for out of a resource? Because at that point you're basically dealing with like a thin wrapper above the API itself, and you're just trying to bring in the HCL benefits around it, or other AZ API benefits. Is that valuable to people, or does that feel like you're basically just running in the land of what's it called? You're just living in the land of HTTP requests, and at that point you're like a postmanning your
I
way
could be
through
wrong
life.
about this, but I think the data block for storage account blobs does not give you the content of the blob. So I've been burned by that. And then the other one was the, what is it, private DNS for Postgres. There's a way that if it's configured so that the Postgres is like private or whatever, and it doesn't have, like, the only way to determine the private IP of the Postgres instance is by looking at the private DNS zone, and you can't query all the records on the DNS zone. So when it creates the Postgres instance, the DNS record has an auto-generated name. So if you want to get the IP of it, you have to enumerate all the Postgres or all the DNS entries. And there is an Azure CLI command for it, but there is not a Terraform data block that exports all of them. And there is like Terraform DNS parsing or whatever, because there's a way to export the DNS zone in the structured format. 'Cause there's like an RFC or whatever that describes the way it should be. So the way I had to solve it was to use a data block with the thing to run the Azure CLI thing to export the DNS records, and then use the Terraform stuff to parse it and extract the first record. So that was a data plane operation that I think would be needed, is like listing all the DNS records and exporting them as an array so I can describe the first element in Terraform that way.
Got it. And that's one that you want that in Terraform. You don't want to go run it outside either.
Yeah, because there was an issue with our container app or something not being able to resolve the FQDN because it was in the private DNS zone or something. There was something wrong with the resolve conf. So we had to use the private IP. So setting the environment variable on the container app to the private IP, where the private IP is only determinable by this DNS record thing. So it was all like, we wanted this in Terraform. When you run Terraform apply, it deploys the whole app. And that was the sticky part, was getting that private IP properly.
Got it.
Yeah, so I to answer your question about do we want data plane like where it's basically like CRUD, REST CRUD operations? Like my response to that is no. If you know, because if I wanted to do that, I could just use TerraCurl, which I actually have had to do, which sucks a lot. I mean, it's like essentially like, you know, using like a local provisioner and just, you know, running a curl command, you know, but using HCL Black Magic to do it. The goal is not to do more HCL Black Magic, right? I guess, but the goal is to manage these resources that reside within these endpoints, and you know, it happens all the time. Like, you know, Kubernetes, for example, is a perfect example. It has its own data plane resources. And you know, there is kind of a, you know, a dependency like graph that you have to respect, because you have to provision the AKS cluster before you can talk to that thing. As things like Terraform stacks like make that, you know, those boundaries between those layers easier to manage. You know, there's less plumbing and baling wire and duct tape to make those stacks work, right?
Yeah.
I like Azure Managed Grafana is one that I've used. Azure Custo, ADX, Azure Data Explorer. There's a third party provider that lets you do all sorts of stuff inside of ADX, creating table schema and things like that. That's quite lovely. I quite enjoyed that. Yeah, I mean, I guess if we had better support for some of these really interesting services, that would be, I would like that. It would make my life easier.
Makes sense. Okay, this was helpful. My demo is not helpful. It's probably not going to work today, but yeah, it's a at your own risk functionality. So, like I said before, kick the tires on it. Let me know what your thoughts are on it. But I think we are continuing to figure out how we can support everything that you want in Azure through Terraform, and that remains a unique problem. We don't want, I mean, in an ideal world, right? It would all be simple and it would all be easy, and we would have all the support from day one. But in the meantime, I think we want to maximize. Robin, was there anything you were gonna add? Sorry, I just saw you off mute.
Yeah, so there was one of the things that we were talking about, like what you would like to do in AzureRM, but now you have to resort to Azure API. And yeah, I'm not sure if this is like even possible or if this is on the horizon. But if I want to deploy something from one pipeline to multiple subscriptions, sometimes things like VNet linking for private DNS zones or for auto registration for VMs, for instance. I need to resort to using Azure API to like get the subscriptions, get the subscription ID, and then push it through that, because you cannot at this moment dynamically fill up your providers, right? You need to always you need to go by hand into your provider information and enter all the subscription IDs, etc., to make these provider blocks, which is quite frustrating when you're using the cloud adoption framework and have hundreds of subscriptions, right? It gets very tedious for a platform team. So is that something that's that's on the horizon? Let's say it like that.
Yeah, the registration process is an interesting one, especially when you're in the middle of subscription vending and you have like all the subscriptions that you're dealing with. Let me take that feedback back and see what we can provide in terms of info on that.
So Stephen, just sometimes it's good to look at our competition to see, what they're doing. And, sometimes we get it right, sometimes they get it right.
Yeah.
AWS, like they were the first ones to market. They had a terrible situation where their provider was locked to a particular region. We learned from their mistake. The AzureRM can provision cross region. It's an amazing thing. AWS finally like changed that recently to 6.0 or something like that. So now they can do multi-region. They don't have to do this ridiculous multi-provider declaration crap to just provision 2 regions. Google Cloud, I think, is a great example of a provider. Like they came even later than us, right? And they learned, I think, from both of our mistakes. With Google Cloud, you can provision across regions, across zones, across projects, right? So that like it would be like if the AzureRM provider, just like the AZ API provider, was not bound by a specific subscription, right? In Google Cloud, it's a project, but for us, it's a subscription.
Yeah.
So,
but we weren't bound by subscription until recently, and I think we've certainly heard the feedback on that one. So,
well,
that's all I'll say.
You're right. You're right. Like we could provision, like it was kind of flexible, but like you had to set a subscription for subscription resources, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, yeah, but it still, we can provision management group resources, right? Like Azure policy, like we can do management group policy attachments and stuff, right? Like that. That didn't go away, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be a
But
great, it would be a great, yeah, it would be so much more comfortable to work with AzureRM if you didn't have to like hard code your subscription IDs into your provider blocks for every time there's a new subscription, because that
I
is
agree.
like, yeah, if you're just working with one subscription or you have like a few, it's totally fine. But if you're like in my case, we have at the moment around 100 subscriptions, and it's growing like sometimes like 5-6 per week at the moment. So it also becomes a very like and then you forget to add them, and then it breaks or things are not compliant. So that would be so helpful.
I hear that. I hear that feedback a lot. The Google Cloud provider has a very elegant fix. Like the provider block has all these optional settings, right? So you can scope the provider block whatever you want it to, like big scope, small scope. For example, like the way it would work for us is if you didn't set the subscription ID on the provider block, every resource that's that's scoped to a subscription, there would be like a newly required subscription attribute on it, right? So like I guess that would just affect resource groups, right? Because then you would have to tell the resource group what subscription it's in explicitly or via input variable, right? But then the subscription would trickle down from the resource group to all of the resource group children. So it really wouldn't be a big impact to AzureRM codebase users if we just let it inherit the subscription from the resource group and then add that new required subscription ID on the resource group. That if you don't set it at the provider block, then boom, you must set it in the resource group.
It'd be nice to have
there are like
a
100 ways to. Sorry, go ahead, Philip.
If I'm deploying a resource group, it'd be nice to be able to say subscription name equals blah instead of having to hard code the GUID. And then on like a storage account that lives inside the resource group, instead of having resource group name, you'd have resource group ID, and then you would just do the .id expression. Same way that I think storage accounts changed this quote unquote recently, where it's the blob containers now expect storage account ID instead of storage account name and resource group name.
While I am, a fan of not embedding GUIDs in infrastructure as code, which is my main gripe with Bicep. Like there's GUIDs everywhere, freaking Bicep. But like the subscription name, unlike a resource group name, is a freeform text box, right? Like you can put like it's like a Word doc.
Have it fail the plan if it's ambiguous.
Yeah. But Dominic, you could still use like a data source for the subscription. And if you can for each the data source for the subscription on like a collection of GUIDs, then you could potentially just isolate the GUIDs to like a config file.
I just want to see the string name like as a literal right next to the resource group name. So resource group name is blah, and then subscription name is blah, instead of having subscription name equals var dot subscription name or whatever.
I feel you. Yeah. Yeah. I guess it could be an option, Use at your own risk. Do subscription names have to be globally unique within a tenant? They must.
If someone has a crazy setup where they're doing multi-tenant stuff, then it would still just be good to have it for all subscriptions visible to whatever stuff's going on. If there's any ambiguity, then
that's an interesting question. Like, is the subscription name even required to be global unique, right? Because if not, then this is not going to work, right? But if it is, then you're fine. It's just whether the portal treats it as like a display name, which is like not used for any data integrity at all, or if it's actually guaranteed globally unique. I don't know.
Yeah, but does it have to be globally unique? Because it works, you always run it from the context of your tenant, right? So if it is unique in your tenant, the display and the name of the subscription, then it should be fine, right?
Yeah. If it's globally unique, yeah. I can't remember.
Well, even if like using a display name that is known to not be globally unique should be fine as long as you have the plan like automatically fail if there's any ambiguity found. Because if
Still
someone
scary,
out there is going crazy and naming all their subscriptions the same thing, that can be their problem. But out here in the, I would rename the subscription before I'd have to start putting GUIDs everywhere in the code, preferably.
I'm totally for that. Yeah. GUIDs and code bad.
On GUIDs and code bad, could we have a email attribute field on the Azure AD security group member? Because that expects GUIDs right now, and all the plans show the GUIDs. So if I add someone to the group, it says plus 099 whatever instead of plus Joe Schmo at example.com.
Doesn't that become PII though once it's committed to state and you have that living somewhere?
I mean, an email address. Like if they're, I guess if you're their employees, like
the Azure AD data's block has a user principal name lookup that would contain email IDs that I don't think is mark sensitive, so I would say it's fine.
That's fair. I mean, let's chat a bit about Azure AD. So we released that MS Graph provider. Have people kicked the tires on that at all, or seen?
I did.
Yeah,
I did. I colossally failed trying to create a PIM, but I think they fixed the bug though. I reached out to the developer on Teams and like he was like, I didn't accept your PR mark, but I accept somebody else's PR. No hard feelings. I was like, okay, it's okay. As long as you fix it, man, I don't care.
So you said you're doing PIM stuff. Was that creating eligibilities or activating them?
I can't remember actually. I think maybe I got blocked at like named resources. Like I couldn't even create a named resource because I was trying to create a PIM for basically like dynamically granting access if you're in a particular network range. But by the way, like the MS Graph, super cool, but it's very much AZ API in like design, principle. And oh my God, the OData annotations. Like, I hope this is like early days of AZ API where we're gonna like clean this up and like make that go away. Cause
no,
like,
I've seen it. It's disgusting. Yes,
it's terrible. So are we, Stephen? You got to tell me like you got some magic wand that's gonna make all that go away, right?
I honestly, the thing is like, it's hard right now to say like what's more important in terms of the bandwidth. Is it more important making the OData go away? Is it more important to, well, anyways, that's another question. I don't know.
I haven't used it, but I'd imagine that the graph is kind of the lower level one, and the AZAD is the one that won't have the OData stuff everywhere. That's my perspective.
Exactly. It's AzureRM AZ API in every sense of like your experience. And it does, empower you to be bomb blocked on day zero and all of that goodness. But in exchange, you are doing the whole OData config. Where's a code sample? I'll drop a code sample so someone's eyes can melt taking a look at it. But
first step is acknowledgement. Well, I forget what it's called. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't even think I have it over here. Well, that's okay. But yeah, or in terms of the Azure AD provider, I think similar thing. Like, are people able to unblock themselves with MS Graph, or have people not really kicked the tires on MS Graph, or?
Well, I've been trying, like inside my organization, we have completely like bought into global secure access for private access to expose internal resources, etc., both on-prem and Azure. And this right now, this is still like a thing we do through the portal because it's you can do it through MS Graph, but it's like very tedious because it's like the special templated enterprise application and you have these network segments that have special rules and stuff. It's just very, very frustrating to get this like all sorted. Are there any plans on getting that into Azure AD? Because yeah, when you talk about creating hundreds of these applications with the network, because you want it to be zero trust, etc. Yeah, it's very tedious to do this through a portal.
Yeah, I mean, just the bandwidth on both sides between HashiCorp and Microsoft is not super high, and the teams are divided or trying to get everything done across everything. So I think it does become one of those things where we just go off of what is the most painful to prioritize, unfortunately. That's where it kind of circles all the way back to the original conversation I had, where it's like, if we can contribute, if we can get people who are like yourselves, experts in understanding how these things should work and working with some sort of time save to kind of get things halfway there, it does feel like it could help in terms of the bandwidth and the capacity. But again, it circles back to like, is that something that you all would prefer to do if it means unblocking or creating more bandwidth or even contributing yourselves?
I mean, it would be great for like making these additions where things are just little things are missing, etc. Because yeah, it's like I'm not getting paid to like write
Yeah.
new resources, right? So
Yeah,
my boss is gonna be like, oh yeah, that's gonna be an issue. But yeah, to I guess really like to like improve on things and like making sure that when there's like a problem with values not being accepted because it's not in this hard-coded list in AzureRM yet for a specific reason, that would be great to like to have a AI like help you in this workflow. I think that would also it would be great for us because it really lowers the bar to like get involved even with like yeah less knowledge of how this process works. So that would
hmm
be great help. But in terms of like adding new resources, yeah, that really involves having
Yeah,
a greater knowledge of how the providers work to really know the Golang language, etc., etc. Right? That's a whole new level.
totally. Yeah, I think like I said before, we just want people to be able to get the functionality they're looking for in the experience that they're looking for. So I think these are just brainstorming sessions, and I really do appreciate all of you for kind of kicking the tires with me on these ideas because we're trying to figure out how we can really unblock all of you in a way that doesn't feel painful, that you don't have to go and stare at the OAuth code in the way that it currently operates. So
Yeah.
all of those experiences, right? We're trying to improve these, but we want to make sure we do so in a way that makes sense and is addressing the roots of your pain. So
And I also I guess if it was easier and if the bar was lower to like contribute to like fix these things, that would also relieve your team on your end and at HashiCorp to like focus less on these bug fixes and like functionality additions to existing resources and to be able to focus more on like adding these new things, right? So it cuts on
yeah,
both ends.
yeah, it's one of those things that's tricky, right? Because to be clear, like we're not saying we don't care about the provider. We're saying we care about the provider, but we don't. But there is the trade-off between like what you said,
Yeah,
the individual support for a property versus actually fixing the provider behavior and getting all of those much more root cause issues out of the way. So it is a open dialogue and discussion that we'll continue to think about as we head into the new year.
yeah.
All right, we have like 2 minutes left. Anybody have anything else they want to talk about? Alrighty.
Just for the 2 minutes, it's gonna be a bit tight, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I do appreciate everybody for hopping on this call. I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season and safe travels if you're traveling wherever you're going. I hope you don't get snowed in. I'm from Chicago, so I've definitely experienced that before. And I'll see you all in the new year.
Have a great one, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Stephen. See you.
See y'all.
Bye all.